My name is Doug Mark. I'm president at LearningZen. LearningZen is an online training platform. And our team has been talking a lot lately about how do we help people who are considering franchising, but they don't know how to get started. What is franchising all about? A lot of people call up and they've got a concept, but they don't know how to get started. And the perfect person to talk to about something like that would be Steve Biegelman. Typically after that, they are wondering, well, what are going to be the legal requirements? And that's something that Lane Fisher is going to cover today. And then finally, at the end, once you've got your brand and you've got all your legal documents and you're ready to start selling units, Red Boswell and his team over at IFPG are excellent, a really excellent group to contact about reselling of your franchise units. And so we'll talk to Red about what makes a candidate attractive to IFPG consultants to resell. So the topic is the ins and outs of franchising. My guest today, I actually have them up here on the screen. You can probably see them in video. If you don't see them on video yet, you will in just a minute. But those are our guests that you're seeing in the background right there. So I'm going to start off and I'll do them kind of in order of how they show up here. So Red Boswell is first. He's actually going to be our third speaker, but you showed up first on my presentation screen. So Red's president of the International Franchise Professionals Group, and that's also known as IFPG. And Red's got an amazing story, but he's a former franchisor. He built a nationwide chain of 148 pet service franchises, in addition to serving various leadership roles for national brands. And Red comes to us today from down in Texas as the president of IFPG. Thanks for joining us, Red.
Great to see you again, Doug.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited for today. I think everybody is. There's a lot of neat topics we're going to cover today. Our first speaker of the day will be Steve Biegelman. You can see Steve's picture up there. He's the CEO and founder of SMB Franchise Advisors. In addition to writing franchising articles for Forbes.com, Steve and his team have helped over 300 franchise brands realize their dreams or launch their franchises. So thanks for joining us, Steve.
Hi, Doug. How you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks again. And last but not least, we have on the bottom here, Lane Fisher, or further to the right if you're looking at the slides on your screen. And Lane is a partner with Fisher Zucker, in addition to being one of the country's best lawyers and a guy who seems to win every award for lawyers in Philadelphia. Every year, this guy wins Best Lawyer in Philadelphia. So a wonderful man to know and to work with. He's also helped work with 500 or over 500 franchise brands. Lane, as always, thanks for joining us today.
Doug, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you folks.
All right. Well, this group mentioned the fact that we could be like the first webinar that actually goes over, because all of my guests love franchising and they love talking about franchising. So we're going to try to keep it to 45 minutes with each speaker talking for roughly 15 minutes on their topics. And then at the end, we're going to have a Q&A. So you can write questions up for our presenters and we can either address them after their individual sessions, or at the end, we can have a sort of a round robin of questions and answers as we go throughout here. You also have the support. If you need any help, just go ahead and hit the chat line at learningzen.com and the chat team can help you through there. And if anybody has any questions after the event, we will be sure to share contact information for everyone. Our plan today was for Steve Biegelman to start off talking about the fact that there's a lot of businesses out there and a lot of people out there who truly have, great ideas or great concepts, and they're thinking about franchising, but they kind of don't know what's next. How do I get started in franchising? What do I need to do to franchise my brand? What kind of steps do I have to take to be successful, or to have a group like SMB, work with me and carry us over the hump? Steve, welcome. Thank you so much. Do you mind talking a little bit about this topic?
Great. Okay. Again, good afternoon, everybody. And Doug, thanks for having us all this afternoon. We appreciate it. So I'll start off talking a little bit about the franchise industry. For those of you on the webinar who don't know a lot about the franchise industry, franchising is a huge industry. Franchising really has created over 8 million jobs, typically a year. There's over 750,000 franchise establishments across the U.S. and we do over $750 billion in revenue. So, franchising is a big, big business. So people say to me all the time, so explain to me a little bit about franchising. What do I get if I become what's called a franchisor? So typically as a franchisor, if you franchise your concept and it makes sense, you typically receive revenue in a few different ways. The first is what's called an initial franchise fee. That's what somebody pays you for the rights to use your name, your system, your process, and your training. Okay. And that typical initial franchise fee ranges from $15,000 to $50,000 or $60,000 on average. Again, there are franchise fees that are $70,000 and $80,000 and $100,000. Probably the average fee today is $40,000 to $50,000 in franchising. Then you also receive something that's called an ongoing royalty, and that's typically a percentage of sales that a franchisee would pay you for the ongoing support that you're going to provide, plus the rights to obviously to use the name and the support. Then you also receive something called vendor rebates that your vendors will pay you for setting up certain systems and processes for your franchisees to buy products from your specific vendors. And then other fees are like transfer fees, renewal fees. When franchisees come up for their term in their agreement, an agreement may be 10 years, they'll typically have to pay what's called a renewal fee, which is a percentage of the then current franchise fee or a flat fee. Or a transfer fee if somebody goes to sell their franchise. So those are the ways you generate revenue as a franchisor. So why would you franchise your business? What are the benefits of franchising? First of all, as the franchisor, it's your responsibility to take care of the brand, right? So that's your responsibility as a franchisor. The franchisees, they have responsibilities too, right? So their responsibility is to take care of the local staffing and the operations of the unit at their location. That's not your responsibility as the franchisor. You give them the tools, they have to follow those tools and implement them locally in their location. Typically, a franchisee is going to invest their dollars. They're going to invest their own life savings. They're going to borrow money from the SBA or partners, equity partners, and they're going to have what we call skin in the game. And they're going to allow you to expand your business much faster than you probably could on your own. And that's a big benefit for franchising. And, franchisees have to concentrate on building local marketing in their community. Okay. It's their job to build that local brand locally. It's your job to give them the tools to do that, whether it's the ad slicks, the marketing pieces, whatever it may be, but they have to implement it locally and build their business. A lot of times, franchisees come on board and say, are you going to build my sales for me? No, you're going to build your sales. We're going to give you the tools to build your sales, right? So, what makes a successful franchise? 4 different components, right? The first thing is the brand, okay? The second thing is the operating system. The third is the support behind that operating system. And the fourth is your franchisees. Okay. In order to be successful, you need all 4. You can't have one, you can't have 2, you have to have all 4 of them, and they all have to work. So, the first thing is the brand, and the brand is so critical, right? You want a brand to be a strong, recognizable name. Everybody knows names like McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts and Subway and Jimmy John's. They're all recognizable names. Okay. You need to deliver that brand in a memorable way. It's really, really important. And that's going to help you create more customers. You need to have a proven operating system, right? You need to have a business model. You need to have great systems and processes and procedures. It's not the job of the franchisee to create those systems and processes. It's your job as the franchisor to train them on those systems and processes, and then they have to go and implement it. Okay. And that's the difference between a franchisor and a franchisee. You need to have operations manuals. You need to have, consistency in your product, right? And that's going to help them grow their customer base and retain customers. You need a support system. So as the franchisor, you need to support your franchisees, right? That's your responsibility. You need to have a corporate office team available to the franchisees. You can't have a franchisee pick up the phone and call you and you say, you know what, I'm too busy running my pizza shop. I can't answer your questions today. I'll call you back 3 days from now. That doesn't work. Okay. And one of the things we try and educate people on all the time is you're no longer in just the pizza business. You're now a franchisor and you're in the franchising business. And that's a hard thing sometimes for people to understand, but they're going in a whole nother business now. They're no longer just in the pizza business or the junk removal business or the handyman business. They're in the franchising business. Okay. And so it's your job to provide counseling and support to those franchisees and help them be successful. So the franchisees, okay, are typically individuals or they form an entity to run the business locally in that community, right? And they made a decision to join your brand. They tend to be very motivated, right? They got their life savings on the line. They got a lot of skin in the game. They needed to be successful, right? So they're very excited about the business. But again, they need your support. They need your support behind them to make sure that they have the right tool. Okay. And, so why does a franchisee choose a particular brand? Why do they choose one of the brands in the IFPG network, right? There's a lot to choose from, right? So why do they make that decision? Well, potential franchisees want to join and open a business in their community, typically, right? They choose a system over other systems because they want to follow a proven model, right? So they're going to typically learn about your franchise concept compared to the thousands of other concepts that are out there in franchising and make the decision to join your system because of the proven concept and the great support and the team. They believe in the people. They love the concept. They love the people. They like the idea. They want to open in their community. They could see doing it with their family or their friends or whoever's going to run the business with them, right? And, typically people need to understand franchisees are not as entrepreneurial as you are as the founder of the business, right? If they were, they'd go create their own business. They wouldn't become a franchisee. Franchisees want to follow a proven model. That's what franchisees do. Okay. So typically franchising really is a very safe way typically to own a business, right? It's a proven model. Most independent businesses don't survive the first 5 years. They struggle, right? Now, there's no guarantee in any business, including franchising, but franchising gives you a leg up to hopefully become successful. Ultimately, you determine the success as the franchisee, but the franchisor, again, is going to give you those tools. So, will you be a good franchisor if you're thinking about franchising your business? Franchising is not for everybody. I mean, Lane and I, have discussed this before, and it's not for everybody. We tell as many people that they shouldn't franchise as they should franchise because, you have to be willing to give up some control. You have to understand that your franchisees are going to run their business. They're going to follow your system and your process and your procedures, but they own the business in their community. They're getting a license to use your name, as Lane will explain when he goes through his part of the presentation. But again, they're operating their business in their community. You can't go in there and start telling their employees what to do. You can tell them what their employees are not doing right, but you can't start directing their employees what to do. Those employees don't work for you. They work for the franchisee. Okay. Are you a good communicator? In franchising, you have to be a good communicator. If you're not, franchising may not be right for you, right? It's important. Communication is the key. Do you have adequate capital to start and become a franchisor? Again, you're going into a whole new business. It will involve an investment into franchising. We've had people start franchising with $100,000 and $500,000 and probably $1 million. And then probably people have started it with even less. But again, there's no set amount, that people will tell you that you absolutely need. But we certainly can give you a range, and Lane can give you a range of what, we think it needs to take to franchise your business. And are you willing and ready to start a whole new business, right? Because if you're not, you shouldn't franchise your business, right? So a couple other things, when you look at franchising your business, is your concept, is it consistent? Do you have a consistent product? Is it unique? Do you have a name that could be trademarked, or are you willing to adjust your name to a name that could be trademarked? Okay. Those are really important factors for franchising. And can it be duplicatable or replicatable? Sometimes people tell me that my concept is so unique for Charlotte, North Carolina, and it can't be duplicated. And I said, okay, then you can't franchise, right? I can't help you franchise it if it's not replicatable, right? It doesn't work. So it has to be replicatable, duplicatable. I understand that nobody's going to be as good as you as the franchisor in most cases. The franchisor, the founder says nobody's going to be as good as me. And listen, I love it when I hear stories of our franchisees or franchisors who call me and tell me about their franchisee who did more revenue than they did. That's the greatest story ever, right? And I love it because they're paying 6-7% royalty on those sales. So as a franchisor, you should be happy about that. You shouldn't get frustrated, but some people struggle with that. And if they do, franchising may not be right for them. So, different components in franchising, we tell people, and then I'm going to turn it over to Lane. Is the financial component. There's the legal component, which Lane's going to talk about in a minute. There's marketing. There's franchise sales, which Red's going to talk a little bit about, and working with franchise broker networks. And then there's operations, right? Supporting the franchisees to help make them successful. So I'll turn it over to Lane to kind of talk a little bit about the legal component, and then I'm happy to jump back in anytime I can.
That's great. Hey, thanks, Steve. Doug, I can't tell whether you have amazing eye contact with Steve or that lava lamp.
I'm surprised they're not going both ways. Yeah, they might be.
And I want to just compliment you on that handsome sport jacket today, because I don't know that I had one the last time, and I'm in your dry cleaning budget now. I feel very safe and comfortable there. Well, thanks for the opportunity and inviting me on here and following Steve. Steve did a great job. And that's, the basic primer of your franchising is not for everybody, but it is for some people. And so I'm going to change my order up a minute just to suggest that Steve mentioned trademarks, and a strong trademark at that, and one that you can license to other people. That's more important than it looks. The ability to register it and the ability to claim a federal trademark registration on your primary mark. If your name is the shoe store, like Steve said, you might have to be amenable to some modified version of your mark if you in fact sell shoes. If you sell, fruit drinks, maybe not. But the fact is that depending on how descriptive your name is, it may impair its registrability. But it's important that you have a name that identifies you and your franchisees as the only source for your products or services. So it also it will mitigate some of the regulatory burden I'm going to talk about now. So what is a franchise? Steve alluded to it. It's a limited license to use a mark and a business system in a particular channel of distribution, in a location, or in an area for a designated term. Like, it's a pretty restrictive relationship. And Steve suggested that all those restrictions appear in the contract between a franchisee and a franchisor, which is the franchise agreement. You'd be well advised to carefully read it. You might be the first one. No, that's a joke. But you should read it, because it's the single best source of information about the company that you're about to make an investment, at least yourself, into that brand. And people don't take it seriously enough. But it's a restrictive relationship. Like Steve said, if you're entrepreneurial and you want to go, the world is your oyster, you wouldn't buy a franchise, because it limits you in the way that you can use the mark and what you can do, what channels of distribution, what you can sell in your location. So it's super important. The FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, has a definition of a franchise, and the definition is significant. If you have a payment of over $500, typically in the first 6 months, you are going to license your trademark and you offer significant control or assistance, you are a franchise. I constantly have people come to me and they're like, hey, Lane, no, that sounds burdensome. I see Red laughing because he gets the same thing. I want to be a license. I don't want to have the red tape associated with regulatory compliance. I want to be a license. But really, it doesn't matter if you can call yourself whatever you want. If you meet the 3 elements, which most businesses will have a trademark license. Most people charge a significant upfront fee, so they'll meet those 2 requirements. And then only in the most, if you are the most distant from your franchisees and never supervise anything or offer them any marketing assistance or any creative or any of those things, would you not be. So typically, most businesses that walk in the door and see one of the 3 of us, even if they say they're not, it's, our presumption is they probably are, and they probably are. Some people do it intentionally. They experiment around with a first licensee. And then some people do it over and over and over and over and over again, knowing that it wasn't the right path to begin with. I see my colleagues laughing because it's true, because people don't know that if you test something, it's in and out, not, where you create lots of bad compliance issues as you go forward. If you are a franchise under the Federal Trade Commission rule, you have to deliver somebody a disclosure document called a franchise disclosure document. We refer to it as an FDD. It's not the contract. It attaches the contract, but it's a significant disclosures on 23 points of information that the FTC thinks is or should be important to your investment decision. It includes audited financial statements of the franchisor, the circumstances under which it can be terminated or renewed or relocated, or training, and all the other, parts that the FTC has determined are significant parts, whether or not they are covered in a franchisor's contracts. It also requires you to state your intention with regard to certain things that would never typically turn up in somebody's contract. There's also a waiting period. That's that you have to have this document in your hands for 14 days prior to entering into any agreement, and it has to be fully complete. Not complete with your address in it, but certainly complete with the material terms of the transaction. And the other big thing, there's two big things. I think I mentioned before, the audited financial statement. So that's a bigger issue. And I'm going to come back to that when we talk more specifically about COVID, because there are requirements that the franchisor maintain those. But the real issue, and it's really where it winds up, I think, for all three of us, is you're not allowed to tell people what they can expect to make or what you make in your locations unless you do it in the FDD, in what's called the financial performance representation. And when Steve says some of you are right for franchising, some of you are not, there's at least one element of that says if your business stinks or you're closed, it may not be right for you, but not just because you're closed, but because your business stinks. So, and by stinks, I mean, people use all sorts of metaphors to talk about their efficient business and all those other things. But efficiency comes out in profitability. That's the translation of efficient, training and other things always plays itself out in your earnings. So pre-COVID, I would have said it's very difficult to sell franchises if you do not choose to disclose certain financial performance representations about your existing business. And because so much of the world and the active franchisors in your space provide so much information that if you provided none, it would be automatically suspect. And so people have, I think, risen to the challenge and tried to identify financial measures that they can use to discuss with franchisees to try to get them comfortable with the business. That's certainly what Red's looking for, not to speak for him. And I see his body language is suggesting this is his issue, because you want to be able to get in front of people. What makes you attractive to other people is is how robust your business opportunity is in relation to what it costs, right? Risk reward proposition, and how risky it is in terms of turnover. If you have 10 units and you've had 400 franchisees, that might be a problem as well. But typically you're trying to show that your units make money. Today, in a world of COVID, you're trying to, for just intelligence, you're trying to show people and have a story of how you recovered or recaptured volume from COVID. So you need this information. If you don't have it in your FDD, you can't say it. And I'm sure now it's the only question folks are asking. And if it's in your FDD from last year, you only have 2019 data. So a lot of folks have voluntarily included their 2020 data, often getting as close as you can, because they're trying to show the best information that they can, and they want to be able to describe the recovery in its most robust sense. And so I think that there are certain, let's keep going. So there are certain states, in addition to complying with this federal Trade Commission obligation, there are certain states that require pre-sale registration and approval of your franchises. In our neck of the woods, and I say ours, not yours, Red, is Maryland, Virginia, Rhode Island over here, New York, and as you head westward, you head, Illinois, California, Oregon, Washington. The Dakotas may not be as valuable, but there are certain states that require pre-sale approval. And those states look at your documents before they give you an approval to sell. And what's happened in the last year is that at least 3 states, Washington, Oregon, and Maryland, have asked more questions require you to include 2020 data as a condition of including an item 19 in your FDD. And they sort of left people hanging for a bit because they were trying to see what was going to happen when the world shut down on no notice, right? And then as it's come back online, they've, in many cases, required people as a condition of registering and keeping it to include this 2020 data. I think at the same time the states were requiring it, people sort of realized that you can't tell the story of 2020 unless you include 2020 data. So at least a lot of our clients have filed amendments and created amendments that talk about the recovery for 2 reasons. One is to either show how quickly they're recovering, and the other is to show that they're not fully recovered. Because if you only have 2019 data with no 2020 data, every franchise you sell in the interim is open to a claim that's, that you had a material change in your financial performance that you needed to disclose. So in that case, it's defensive. But if you give somebody 2020 data and it shows that you're off, then people proceed on that basis and you've made the requisite disclosures. Other people include them because they're not off. They're the opposite. They're trying to show lift and magnitude and trying to take the sting out of things. So those folks are going in and doing early registrations, but amendments. And so I think that that's something for folks to consider if they have a good story to tell. But the point is, the story has to catch up with the opportunity to first do your regulatory compliance and then to include it in your other in the other places that you in your other promotional stuff. So, Red, I see you moving. I would just, what do you think is because I'd like this to be more collaborative. These discussions always are. And so people always say, well, what's different about franchising now, right? Because it's not everything is the same as it was last year's. And the winners and losers are sometimes categorical. They're sometimes brand related or platform related or unexplainable. But there are some people that are rising while others are falling. But what do you tell people, Red, about, not to shift the question or take your job, Doug, but what do you tell people, Red, in a world where there's a pandemic, what they should look for in the FDD?
What they should look for in the FDD?
Or item 19.
Yeah, certainly in a world of, an item 19 in an FDD allows for financial performance representations, and it has to be true and relevant and up to date. And when significant changes happen in a business, such as a pandemic, you need to get that updated quickly and have it doesn't have to be audited, but rather auditable, provable. And so, if you've got a business that has been seriously negatively affected, you better make those updates. Now, if it's been positively affected, hey, it's smart to make the updates. You don't necessarily have to because they're to the benefit of the buyer. But if they're to the detriment of the buyer and you don't make those updates and then you award that franchise, Lord help you, you're going to get some trouble down the road.
Yeah. So, I think that that's correct. And Steve, I don't know if you want to get in on that with the item 19 stuff.
Yeah, I think that, what you and Red said is totally on point. Obviously, there are concepts that are actually doing really well. Home-based concepts, mobile concepts, a lot of non-brick and mortar, non-retail. They're doing really, really well. Or fast casual restaurants that focus on takeout. We have some clients that their sales have been up, the last 6-8 months during the pandemic. So, in those cases, those businesses, want to show their 2020 numbers because they're doing so well. And they want to be able to talk about them, just like you said, Lane, and Red said as well.
And I think I misspoke. I said Oregon. It's California, Washington, and Maryland that we're holding everybody up. And that ultimately require people to include 2020. And of course, if you include it in one state registration, you typically would pick it up in the balance of your state registration. So, but I saw many people that didn't have a rehabilitative story hold up on that for a period of time. Steve also touched on something I just want to touch on briefly, which is how much money you need to franchise. We sometimes call it initial capitalization because we want it, if we can, for it to run through the franchisor entity. And as I mentioned earlier, that number has to be audited. And as I didn't mention earlier, but we'll mention now, the income recognition rules have changed or are in the process of changing or in a state of flux. And there's some, I think, better guidance to come out of FASB, which is the agency that regulates it. But you need to essentially now amortize your initial franchise fee over the term when you used to be able to recognize the initial fee when your unit opened. So what that does is it takes something that would have gone into cash and income and puts only a portion of it in income and puts the rest in an accrued liability. When I take stuff that should be income and I make it an accrued liability, it has a bad effect on my financial statement. It erodes my capital. So it's the blessed curse of being successful. When you're wildly successful, you will drive yourself into a recapitalization circumstance, and it should be eyes wide open, and you should know you're doing it to yourself, but it's the blessed curse, right? Because you need to contemplate liquidity events if you are wildly successful. And depending on what your your recognition circumstances are, it's not quite black and white. Accountants, there's a number of things that you can try to recognize upfront as a portion of the fee and then amortize only the balance, but that's a real push-pull between accountants And it really changes, I think, dramatically what people need to start if they, depending on what their appetite is. I would say to somebody like, do you want to open 1 or 2? Or do you want to open 500 in the first year? If you say 500, first I'm going to try to talk you out of it. That's stupid. But, obviously, if you wanted to get buckshot the whole country and open them all over the place and incur national promotional things, you're going to have a much different capital requirement and burn rate than you would otherwise. And, there are many well-funded companies that choose to pursue a strategy with a high burn rate because they have money. But, I think people as a typical entrepreneur have to be mindful of that. I don't think you necessarily need it all up front. And I'm always leery of people that would tell me that they need 10 million in the bank to start, but you need to eyes wide open, anticipate, making some changes based on your level of success, or guess what? Stop selling when you think that you can no longer support the financials. Because when your financials go negative, that's when your liabilities exceed your assets. Many of the registration states that we talked about earlier will give you a hard time about getting registered without some sort of escrow or some sort of financial accommodation that makes you look weak. So I just want to make sure people are focused on the financial statements, on the initial capitalization. I think that is a thing that is important. It may be as you are in your experimental state that you want to get a couple sold and get a couple open so that you have some people to validate and you can determine the financial performance is stable or unstable based on what you have experienced yourself. But in our world, like Steve said, when you increase the nucleus beyond the original founder and start introducing people in from other states, you average the numbers down. And I always say to people that are in the point of deciding that these FDDs are publicly available. There are 3 sources for FDDs where you can go pull a competitor's franchise disclosure document. Now, it may not be instantaneous in terms of it's being updated, but it's available to you. And you can look at their item 19. And I would venture to say today, you can look at probably their 2020 information. But I think it's always good to get a sense of what other people are doing in your industry. So you can get they can be obtained for free. We find them for people just to point them to them. But, a lot of times on somebody else's measuring stick, you are a superstar or a stellar compared to somebody that's averaged down who's highly successful at franchising. So that's the legal part. I mean, I can provide people those links, Doug, in terms of to get the FDDs and any other information. But I think I'll turn it over to the other fellows now.
Hey, Lane, how does the process go for somebody acquiring somebody else's FDD to review it? Are they going to go to a company like you, or is that something that they would do on their own? How does that work?
No, you can log right into, let's say, the Wisconsin website. And if a franchisor is registered in Wisconsin, you can get a copy of their FDD in whatever the most current one that was filed. Same with California, same with Washington. And some of them are, are get behind, and Wisconsin may be the easiest one to check first, but it allows you to go pull the 3 biggest names of people you think are successful at franchising in your space. Yeah, and let's look at their initial investment. Let's look at their fees and costs, and let's look at their financial performance.
But keep in mind, Lane, if I may interrupt, if I'm a ZOR and a candidate comes into my process and informs me they've already pulled my FDD, that's a red flag.
No, we're talking about franchisors. So I'm saying if you want to be a janitorial franchisor, I'm saying pull 3 janitorial franchise agreements and see what they're offering in terms of risk reward proposition to see if you're in the bandwidth of the bell curve, or whether you're wildly more profitable or wildly more efficient, meaning you don't need an office or whatever else somebody else might be incurring.
Yeah, Lane is spot on. One of the things that we do with our clients when somebody signs on as a new client that wants to franchise their business, one of the first things we do is a competitive study. And we look at about 10 different brands that are in the same industry or very similar. And we look at all the things Lane mentioned: franchise fee, royalty, territory size, term, renewal fee, transfer fee. We look at all those things. We put together a report and we share it with our client. So very, very important. Lane's spot on. And, determining the franchise fee that you go to market with is really important because you got to be competitive with all the other brands, out there, the 3,000 other franchise brands, and maybe the 10, 20, 30, 40 in your direct industry. And 2, you got to be competitive because companies like IFPG are going to say, what's your franchise fee? A, is there enough in it for us? And B, are you competitive with everybody else that's in your category from a fee standpoint? So Lane's spot on to do that kind of research.
Well, and Just to clarify, Red, you were just going down the avenue of if we're talking about the other side, if a franchisee were to pull, some FDDs and bring them and talk to you, you saw that as a red flag. Can you expand upon that just so we can kind of understand the line of thinking
As a
there?
franchisee, you need to be able to follow a process. You need to be coachable. And if a candidate is asking on call 1, minute 1, oh, I need your FTD, they're trying to be the boss.
Yeah.
Now, we have to be flexible and empathetic and understand what their motivation. But as coaches, as consultants to the buyers, we help thousands of people acquire franchises at IFPG. We educate them on the process. And even if that ZOR does give you by default an FDD after the first call, you don't really need to look at that. You look at it, it's a 100, 200, 300 page document. Why in the world would you want to punish yourself diving into that ugly, annoying document? Now there would be some interesting information, but let's date before we get naked. As if I may be so blunt.
Yeah.
And that document is something that once you're in love, hey, let's go look into this and study it and understand it. But until then, it's a waste of time because you're looking at half a dozen opportunities. You're really going to read 220 pages times 8 opportunities. Give me a break.
Well, that's obviously something that is important. If you're looking at candidates, you want somebody that can follow the process and follow the steps. So maybe a perfect segue to turn it on over to you, Red, and talk a little bit about what do ideal, franchise brands look like to IFPG consultants?
Sure. Well, Doug, this is I appreciate this panel. Any one of the panelists today could speak on any one of these topics for 15 hours, much less 15 minutes. So thank you for combining some of the most critical pieces of franchise development and franchising in general on this call. Oh, sorry. One sec. There's a phone call. Yes, sir. This is Red. Okay. Oh yeah, they're here. Yeah. Stephen Lane. Okay. Let me check. Hey, Stephen Lane, President Trump is asking what the heck is going on with Pennsylvania voting. I'll get back to you, sir. Sorry, I amused myself. So some folks are listening now going, okay, huge topic, franchise legal, huge topic, setting everything up properly. And this narrow topic of what IFPG consultants are attracted to. Let's put in perspective why you're asking that. A consultant, a referral consultant, a franchise development consultant, helping people find the right franchise. What's attractive to them is what's attractive to a candidate. So a franchisor working with consultants, why would they in the first place work with consultants? There may be some ZORs on here, prospective franchisors listening going, that's just, what are consultants and why would I work with them? Well, help you understand that. One of the largest by far, CRM in franchising. There are a lot of CRMs, these sell CRMs. Well, the largest, FranConnect, over 800 franchisors using them, has so many cool metrics, so much fantastic data, because when 800 plus ZORs are using them, inputting their franchise development sales numbers and where they're coming from and how fast they come into a decision-making process, fascinating data comes out of that. And so now quarterly, they publish these sales indexes and all this, nerdy franchise guys like me just drool over it. Well, the last 2 quarters, they've published some information that will hopefully make this point that you're asking more relatable to the audience, which is what's the number one source of deals? Not number one source of leads. You don't care about leads because you don't want to waste time with hundreds of leads that are worthless. Where are buyers coming from in the franchise world? Where are franchisors finding their buyers? Number one source in the world has become, these last 2 quarters for the first time ever, franchise referral consultants. And so that's, I think, we'll put in perspective why you're asking these questions. What's attractive to a referral consultant? Well, they're the number one source for deals. And IFPG is the number one consulting group voted on by hundreds of franchisors in Entrepreneur Magazine. So what is attractive to the number one source of the number one source for franchisors?
Yeah.
You get your act together. You just heard two guys, world-class leaders in franchising, share about how to get your legal in order, how to get your entity created, and how to structure it properly. So first of all, foundational stuff here, guys. Take it to the next level. Understand what a consultant is and isn't. A consultant is not your franchise development person. A consultant is a lead source, okay? You're going to franchise consultant, brokers, matchmakers, advisors, coaches, whatever you want to call them. They are spending their hard-earned money, time, effort, blood, sweat, and tears finding buyers for franchisors, but not just one specific franchisor. They're not falling in love typically with one franchisor and going and finding buyers for them. They're out similar to a real estate agent, looking for folks interested in buying a house. In our case, looking for folks interested in investing in or purchasing a franchise. And then they build a trusted advisor relationship. They get pertinent information, geography, available cash, attractiveness, things they like and don't like, on and on and on. Again, similar to a real estate agent. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage, pool, this part of town, this investment level, etc. Same thing with them. And to continue that analogy, a consultant in franchising works on a success fee, like a real estate agent. You don't pay them a cent until the deal is consummated, until a franchise is awarded. Then you share part of that franchise fee with the consultant. So understanding that helps a lot of folks get clarity on the financial risk involved, because we hear for decades now that you as a ZOR are going to spend $10,000 to $20,000 in marketing to get to a franchise sale. It's a lot of money to put at risk. 3 years ago, I spent $60,000 on portals to get one deal. So it may not be 10,000, it may be 60 in some cases. And so that financial risk, as a marketer, I want to find the resources that give me leads, the lowest financial risk, the least amount of time, least amount of effort. Let's get it to a deal, the least cost overall. And so that's why we've become the largest lead source for closed deals, is because we're the lowest financial risk. And so what attracts us to that ZOR? Well, a ZOR who matches on paper. So as you talked about finding a house, we enter all the data, the science of the deal into our system. The system takes it from hundreds of franchise opportunities down to maybe dozens. But again, as consultants, we're not going to present dozens to a buyer. We're going to help hone it down further. And so then the art of the deal comes. The science was the easy part. Get the info, put it in the system. System tells you what matches. Now let's look at the art. 3 pieces to the art. First is that consultant, knowing their buyer, knowing their ins and outs, their personalities, looks at the franchises that match on paper. Is this franchise growing? Are they shrinking? Do they have significant litigation? Do they have a weak balance sheet? Do they have an item 19? Are they emerging? They do a territory check to see what's available and what's not in certain areas. So we take the opportunity and hone it down further and further. Next step of the 3 is they look at the franchise development rep. A lot of ZORs don't realize how important that rep is to the process, not just for the candidate, but especially for the consultant. Do I like him? Do I know her? Do I trust her? Because I'm going to give my baby, this candidate that I've built a trusting relationship with, to them. And if they embarrass me, it's going to hurt my relationship and my credibility. So that franchise development rep is extremely important. And lastly, yes, we are human. Commissions play a factor oftentimes in a perfect evaluation. All other things being equal, that could be an influence. So understanding the science, the art, and ultimately what makes you attractive, all of those things, all that recipe for success coming together. You heard about item 19, you heard about the legal, you heard about the financial, you heard about the availability. All of that comes together to make an attractive mix for the consultant and ultimately for the candidate.
It seems like we must have done the presentation in the right order, because you're very much dependent on what Steve and Lane do before they end up being a good fit, it seems like, with IFPG.
Yeah, absolutely right. Consultants are savvy enough to smell a rat. Someone who doesn't understand franchising, hasn't put the due diligence in place properly, and set themselves up for success. And we, as an IFPG, as a consulting group, do some vetting of that beforehand. We review their FDD to make sure there's no big red flags. And if there are, we're going to get answers and perhaps turn them away. An odd thing about us, I think a nice benefit is we love emerging brands. So emerging brands oftentimes are shunned by consultant groups because they haven't proven their model to the market yet, other than the corporate model. And so we welcome that and hopefully help them succeed and be the next Subway.
Well, it does bring me back to something that actually Steve had said. Hey, Steve, when you were talking before, you talked about when a franchisor has a franchisee that's, wildly successful, they're kind of celebrating that, on the back end, or at least franchisors, I feel like, should be. Is
Right.
that in, a representation of the fact that they do likely have good systems in place and they've kind of done all the due diligence? Or does that just happen organically on its own sometimes?
No, it certainly is a combination, right? So, typically a franchisee isn't going to be wildly successful if the franchisor has no systems, no processes, no branding. That would be an anomaly, right?
Yeah.
But franchisees do sometimes become successful, partly because the franchisor has done a pretty good job on all the things I just mentioned, but also goes above and beyond, right? They're a rock star. They're a superstar. They're going to be successful whether they owned a Subway, a Dunkin' Donuts, or an emerging brand that has 5 units, right? And those are the franchisees that every franchisor wants, right? We all want the rock stars,
Yeah.
right? And if we could all figure out, the 3 of us and everybody else in franchising, how to pick just the rock stars, we'd all do it, right?
Yeah.
But that's hard to do, right? Whether you test them, with Caliper and all those other, programs out there, Myers-Briggs and everything else, or whether you just take them through your process and interview them with your management team, it's still tough to prove and, who's going to be the perfect franchisee and who's going to be those rock stars. But clearly, as a franchisor, and I've been a franchisor for many, many years before I became a franchise consultant and, helping people franchise their business. And I could tell you that I love the rock stars. I put them, front and center. I showcase them in front of all the other franchisees at every franchise convention we had. I'd put them on panels. I'd make sure they got awards in front of everybody because I wanted everybody else to want to be just like them. Okay.
Amen. That is so true. And you want to get something done in a franchise organization, have the successful franchisees share it. They're going to listen to them way more than they listen to you.
Yep.
And by the way, I talk to like the guys on the panel. We're talking to Zors, potential Zors all day long. A big mistake I hear a lot of them make is setting their IFF, their initial franchise fee, too low. We heard Steve share that the typical, the average is in that 40 to 50 range. That was good to hear because so many times I'll speak to them and I'll ask them what the IFF is. And they've got, well, it's 25 and they're, we're good to go. And I'm like, man, is your franchise, where'd you get that? Oh, the attorney said that's what I should probably do. I'm like, is your attorney 100 years old? Are they not? I mean, where did they get 25? So, well, I'm a pizza restaurant and Papa John's and Pizza, Hut are doing 25. You're not Pizza Hut. You're not Papa John's. You don't have billions in the bank. You need to be able to market it, and you need that money to market it, whether it be to the consultants or however you're going to do it. And so and I frankly think you're going to sell more when you have a higher fee, oftentimes because they're looking at the all-in investment, not the franchise fee by itself. So, and nobody wants the cheapest one when you're making a life decision. The average commission well, I won't go into commissions, but the average franchise fee close to $50,000. Gives you enough money to invest elsewhere.
Yeah, for sure. Guys, we have reached kind of what I would call the witching hour here. We've got about 8 minutes left of our webinar. I know we had mentioned the fact that there was some Q&A options. You might have noticed a couple of questions have popped in. Please, if you're outside as an attendee and you've got any questions, send them along in the Q&A and we'll make sure that they get answered. We did have a couple of questions that we had from earlier that I was just going to go ahead and kind of go around the room on as those additional questions come in. But I know I've already learned a ton today. One thing in particular that really resonated with me was that notion read that, at the end of the day, the consultants are going to did you say kind of hand it off or back to the franchise development rep? Is that the typical process?
Yeah. So there's a term in our little world called fricking and fracking. That consultant, the trusted advisor that introduced the candidate to the ZOR, is going to stay involved in the process. It's sort of like taking a back seat. The ZOR's leading the process. They're driving that ship, but the consultant is still there to advise to, yes, the FDD is a normal part of the process. Yes, a discovery day can be helpful. Hey, you didn't finish your homework, they inform me. Let's make sure we get that. Or, hey, the spouse should get on that call. Make sure he or she is on there, and vice versa. Hey, Mr. ZOR, you're in second place out of 3. They're looking at so-and-so and so-and-so, and they're a little more scared about your all-in investment. They didn't think you were very clear on the startup costs. So helping both sides, being that intermediary can be critical.
And again, if you know where the boogeymen are, if Red has called you twice and say people think your initial fee is unclear, then clear it up. If they tell you everybody thinks that a manager in the location is going to be $200,000 and we know it's $35,000, put it in, right? Take the boogeymen out of the process, because when you talk to people like Steve and Red, you're going to get a lot of sophisticated feedback back about what objections people have when they read your document. And there is no one size fits all. A lot of people are successful using completely divergent strategies. And so there is, well, the way you're doing it necessarily isn't wrong, but you want to be able to, coach folks in, and you want to be able to collect the most information you can about your business that takes the sting out, especially to Red's point, if you're more emerging and you don't have as many operators or as many units or as much wherewithal in the bank as others. So I didn't mean to steal the thunder there.
If you're emerging ZOR and you're curious what the candidates are going to think of your model, just put that model in front of the consultants. They ain't shy. They're going to tell you left and right, up and down, what the problems are and why it sucks, if it does or not.
What's the average deal in IFPG? Is it for one or more than one?
Oh man, every year it goes up and up and up. ZORs and buyers are both getting more and more attracted to that multi-unit crafting something. Because you talk to 90+% of candidates. Would you like more than one if it's a successful model? Well, it's like 99%. Of course I would like more than one. Okay, great. Then let's put that into the plan. How can we either get that into a structure now, protect you for the future? Because they all are curious. I don't want a ZOR next door, another Z in my neighborhood, or could I secure all this area, but I don't have enough money to secure it. Let's put a plan in place where we can secure it without too much risk on your side financially. So yeah, that's a big trend in franchising, multi-unit.
Yeah, I think we're seeing more 3-packs from our clients with the referral networks, the consultants, for sure. I mean, there's no doubt about it. The other thing I wanted to add too, what Red said before, I think is really important, Doug, for emerging brands to realize that the consultants or the referral networks, they're not selling your business for you. Okay. They're sending you a qualified lead that you wouldn't have had on your own, typically. Okay. They're sending it to you, and you have to work that lead through your process. So if you're a big franchisor, you have a franchise development team, or you have a great outsourced team, whatever it may be. But if you're an emerging franchisor with 2 units, you don't have a director of franchise development yet. You can't afford it. So you're doing it yourself as the founder, or you're outsourcing it to somebody. So that person, whoever it is, you as the founder or who you're outsourcing it to, is really, really important to Red and his team.
Yeah.
Okay. Because they're sending that lead to you, and they want to make sure that you're going to take them through the process and hopefully close them, right? Because that's how that consultant gets paid. Yep. So you need to understand that they're not selling the lead on your maid concept or your handyman service or your restaurant. Right. They're getting them excited about it, and sharing data with them. But it's you that has to take them through the process. And if they don't have the confidence that you're going to do a good job with them, they're not going to send the lead to you. I mean, correct, Red?
Yeah. Walking through the mall, when that Chick-fil-A offers me a little taste, they know what they're doing. And we're offering candidates a little taste. Is this something you like? No? Awesome. How about this? Is this attractive? Now, we've already asked you your palate, your attractiveness, your spice level in the food analogy. Now, here's what seems to match it. Are we correct? Oh, great. You do like that. You'd like more. Wonderful. Let me introduce you to the chef. So I just threw that together. Wow.
You nailed it. Yeah. You couldn't have done any better. Well, guys, this has been amazing. I really appreciate all of our panelists joining us today and all of our guests, as well as the Learning Zen team on the back end who helped out with all of this. I hope that we get to do something like this again with all of you. I love working with you all, and I think you guys provide a lot of value to the clients. And I've worked with a lot of you guys on different deals with clients that are ours or shared amongst all of us. And the one commonality between all of it is that you all have very happy clients and very happy customers. So kudos to all of you for having truly memorable and great brands yourselves. So thank you all.
Thank you, Doug.
Thanks, Doug.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us today.
Thanks,
Yeah, thanks.
everybody. If you've got any questions or comments, you can always forward and send them along to dougm@learningzen.com. I did have a slide that just went through questions and answers, but we got them all answered as we went. Everybody enjoy your day. Happy holidays. Stay safe. Wear your masks. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks, Doug.